Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk from Jerusalem, Israel, the Temple Institute. Rabbi Richman here together with Yitzchak Reuven. Today, the 22nd day of the month of Nisan, 5777. It's 18th of April, 2017. And today is 7 days, which are 1 week of the counting of the Omer, the Shabbat. We will be reading Parshat Shmini. Yitzchak,
yes, sir.
How was your Pesach?
My Pesach was very, very nice. From the first day to the last, from the opening Seder to the 7th day of Passover.
To the splitting
went very
of the
well.
sea.
Did a lot of thinking about what it's all about, what the Passover, Seder, and celebration's all about.
What were you thinking?
I was thinking about, what our ancestors did in order to make it possible. God, He did the makot, He did the 10 plagues. But like, God's God, He can do anything. Right? God can do anything.
Okay.
But all those 10 plagues, which, softened up Egypt, so to speak, would have been nothing if Israel hadn't have done the craziest things, like take the lamb on the 10th day and slaughter the lamb on the 14th day and paint the doorpost with the blood. That's outrageous.
Right.
Absolutely outrageous.
Very
but
politically
they did it.
Incorrect.
Whew, super politically incorrect.
I hope all of our listeners had a wonderful Passover. I mean, we didn't bring the Passover offering, of course. I shouldn't say of course. We shouldn't take it for granted that we're not going to be bringing it, but we were not able to bring it once again this year. And we did have a beautiful holiday as best as we could with our families. And, of course, that leads to the times that we're in now. And by the way, the traditional greeting that we give each other after Passover is, in Hebrew, Kayetz Bari, and in Yiddish, a guten Zummer, which basically means have a happy, healthy summer. Listen, sitting there at the Passover Seder, and I had a thought. Struck me. Felt like Hashem was really speaking to me. First of all, it was a beautiful Seder, and it was all about the kids, and the children were so motivated, the grandchildren, and so happy. And decided long ago that if you're making a Seder where you have little children, you have to only concentrate on the little children and nothing else, because we want them to have a very positive experience. It's really all about the kids. The Torah says, you shall tell your son on this day, saying, on account of what Hashem did for me on this day when He took me out of Egypt. Anyway, listen, Yitzchak, I want to share this with you. I had this thought all of a sudden. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It wasn't at the Seder. It was at the Torah reading on the 7th day of Pesach, in the Torah reading of the Song of the Sea.
Yes.
And, it's just so inspiring. The whole concept of the 7th day of Pesach is so amazing, the staying up a little bit the night before and reading the verses and knowing that it's at this night at midnight that the sea split and we walk through, and feeling, the challenge of what that means for us today. But I had this thought as I was reading along the verses for the, manyth time of my life, seeing this chapter of Exodus, not the first time. All of a sudden I said to myself, what is up with the Egyptians that they went in after the Jews? Like, hello? It's like, didn't they think, like, before we all go jumping into this is weird. Like, I understand that, they were very upset and everything, but, like, they go in and they're following them the whole night, like many, many hours. And then towards dawn, the waves came on over them, But you're looking at something supernatural. You're looking at something very, very unusual. How come it didn't strike them as somewhat, dangerous? Then they didn't say, let's just look at this for a minute. Like, this is not normal, okay? We're really upset, like, they're leaving and everything. We want to get them back. But before we all just go overreacting, do you really think that we should go into the seabed? I mean, I've never seen a dry. And they said to each other, like, Mahmoud, like, Musa, did you ever see a dry seabed before? No, I never saw one before. Do you think this is really what we should do now? Does your insurance cover this?
First of all, your names Mahmoud and Musa are a little anachronistic.
I know, that's true. That's true. Okay, it was more like Ramses and Memphis. What do you think? Do you think this is what? Do you hear my question?
Yes.
It never struck me as vividly as when I was reading the verses this year. Like, why did they go in? Like, didn't they think this is really, really strange? Like, I'm not comfortable with this. I don't know if that's the place where we should be inside that. Anyway, as quickly as I thought of this question, which I thought was divinely inspired, I also thought of the answer. And I feel that this is so timely and so applicable. And the answer is, that's what hatred does, especially hatred of the Jews. And they were so totally consumed and blinded by this total, desire to destroy and obliterate. And isn't this what the sages say, that it's mekalkel et ashura? In other words, they no longer were able to think according to any normal reasoning or logic. And you know what? Since then, that's been a pattern as well of the enemies of Israel. And and this is what people bring upon themselves.
And you got to figure that God was anticipating that response when he split the sea. I don't think that God was taken by surprise that Egypt went in. He knew that was, the splitting the sea had the twofold effect of being able to give Israel a kevish milut, a way out, and of ultimately being able to bury the army of Pharaoh. But it's we see it all the time. And, look at the hatred. Look at what...
Look at Europe decided to get rid of its Jews, and look what Europe has now.
Right. So, Iran. What's
good luck with that.
What's going to happen to Iran? They're running full steam ahead into the sea.
Big headline today, as we go to the microphone. This Isru Chag, which is the name of the day, which is still a festive day, the day after the festival. And of course, in the diaspora today is actually a festive day. It's the 8th day of Passover. Big headline today is that the Allies knew about the scope of the destruction of European Jewry as early as 1942. Even though it had been denied and it had never been proven before that they knew so early, but England and America and Russia were completely aware of the fact that millions of Jews had already been murdered, and that the rest were planned on being murdered by 1942, which is, like, I guess to some people, a very, very big surprise. I'm really not surprised at all.
I guess they didn't run to do something about that.
Exactly. In the meantime, we have, while there are rumblings of war from such quarters as North Korea and the atrocities that are going on in Syria, and all the speculation about what the coming days and weeks will bring, I'd like to discuss with you, Yitzchak, another headline today, and that is the New York Times op-ed that was written by Marwan Barghouti, who is an arch-terrorist who is personally responsible for the murder of at least 26 Israelis.
Personally and
masterminded.
And directly, but he also was the mastermind of the Second Intifada, and he was the mastermind of the Tanzim, if you remember the Tanzim, who were the Palestinian, the Arab terrorists who spearheaded that Intifada, and which took the lives of thousands of people. He is a mass murderer.
And I don't know what the circumstances are that the guy was allowed to write an op-ed for the New York Times. I don't know what the what the dynamics are of how that was facilitated, you know, that he, and of course, so the New York Times completely sanitizes his role as a murderer, and basically, Marwan Barghouti is writing this article. He says, you know, I'm beginning a hunger strike now because I have to call attention to the arbitrary arrest and incarceration that Israel does in the occupation, and is a colonial state, and all these things, and he's a political prisoner. It's unreal.
It's unbelievable.
The New York Times doesn't even mention.
And he also lies about all sorts of tortures that he went through. But this is, by the way, is the same phenomenon as Pharaoh's army going into the sea, because the New York Times seems to be so consumed by hatred of the state of Israel that it will publish any lies, any garbage it can in order to vilify Israel. And this prisoner strike was something that's been in the planning for months, which means that the Barghouti op-ed was also in the planning for months. It means that the New York Times was a co-conspirator in this whole quote, Palestinian prisoner hunger strike, in order to, you know, the goal is to undermine the state of Israel. And the New York Times is totally in on that. And as you started to say, they simply, after they gave him full reign to just spew lie after lie after lie after lie, then the closing sentence was, Marwan Barghouti is a parliamentarian and influential politician or something. Right. Without any mention of the fact that he's a mass murderer, and that he's serving 5 life sentences.
5 life sentences, convicted by a civilian court of these murders. And I got to tell you, Yitzchak, I remember the day that he was caught.
Yes.
In Ramallah, I believe it was, in some hole that he was hiding in. And I saw the pictures, and he was literally shaking like a leaf and cowering, like the spineless murderer, coward, human look-alike that he is. How he was pulled out from this crack that he was hiding in by the IDF, and the look on his face, and how he really expected to be killed on the spot, and the terror that he felt, that he thought, wow, I'm going to get what I deserve now. And how he has become filled with such arrogance and impunity,
and he's the darling of the...
and with no regret, and how he has turned these tables. How he was so, it looked so vulnerable, and you saw that he really expected, like, they're going to shoot him on the spot, which is exactly what they should have done. And so, again, yes, the New York Times is complicit. The New York Times is complicit in so much from the time of the Holocaust, which is the story that we were talking about before. But my question is, how does the state of Israel allow this man to contribute an article to the New York Times from his padded cell? How did they do that?
Who knows? For all we know, it wasn't. He didn't even write it. For all we know, the New York Times, wrote it, or for all we know, some Arab Knesset member smuggled it into him. I don't know. It's the whole thing is disgusting, despicable, and again, fake news. If this isn't fake news, even though it's an op-ed, if this isn't fake news, I don't know what is. And the subject of fake news, people say,
this whole picture that's conjured up, of like this legitimate struggle against the occupier, against Israel, against this colonialism, and with a whole set of, forget about fake news, with a set of fake history,
right,
with a set of fake antecedents and fake national memory and fake culture and everything about the Palestinian so-called struggle, which is basically a pan-Arab conspiracy to destroy the state of Israel.
It's all fake. And by the way, the terrorist units that Barghouti was developing and training and supplying and funding, took place, was happening months before the, what was it, Camp David 2 or something, between Ehud Barak, who was then Prime Minister of Israel, and Arafat, Yimach Shmo, when Israel foolishly, idiotically, stupidly offered everything that they thought that the Arabs could possibly dream of wanting on a silver platter, and it was rejected. And then within days, this violence began. It was all premeditated. None of it was real. None of it was spontaneous. This was a whole plan to succor Israel and the United States, and then to come out with a full barrage of murderous violence, which took the lives of thousands and thousands of people. And this is a man who's being celebrated today by the New York Times, who, after it was pointed out to them, they reprinted the description of Barghouti at the end of the article, and it mentioned that, by the way, he's serving a 5 lifetime sentence for being convicted for murdering 5 people. Oops, didn't think it was relevant to mention it the first time when we presented this freedom fighter. Yep, today's Pharaoh.
This week, we are reading Parshat Shmini, and on the timeline, we're going back now to Rosh Chodesh Nisan. You know, the book of Leviticus began with instructions for many of the korbanot, of the offerings. We read Vayikra, and then we read Parshat Tzav. And then, of course, on Passover, there were the special Passover readings. So we interrupted the cycle of the weekly portion. And now, this week, we're reading Parshat Shmini, beginning in chapter 9 of the book of Leviticus. And it was on the 8th day. And this is describing the this important day that we just recently celebrated, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the first of the months and the first day of Nisan, the first of the year, biblically speaking, the first of Nisan, which is the day of the completion of the inauguration of the tabernacle. There was a 7-day period of inauguration process, which began on the 23rd day of Adar. And on the first day of the month of Nisan, the most remarkable day, when the Shekhinah descended, the divine presence descended upon the tabernacle, and the priestly service began, and fire came down from heaven and lighted upon the altar, and the priestly blessing was uttered, and all the firsts, referred to by our sages as the 10 crowns with which the month of Nisan was adorned. And then we read about the unauthorized, strange fire that was brought by the sons of Nadav and Avihu, which appears...
The sons of Aaron. By the sons of Aaron.
Right, I'm sorry, by the sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, which appears exactly after Aaron raised his hands and gave the priestly blessing for the first time. And then verse 24 in chapter 9 tells us, a fire went forth from Hashem and consumed upon the altar the burnt offering, etc. The people saw and sang glad song, this incredible word that is used here. Vayaronu, the people, Vayaronu, they sang, and they fell upon their faces. And then immediately afterwards, the sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, each took his fire pan. They put fire in it, placed incense upon it, and they brought before Hashem an alien fire, each zara. And the rest of the story, that they were consumed. A fire came forth from heaven, from Hashem, but from before Hashem, and consumed them, and they died before Hashem. Moses said to Aaron, of this did Hashem speak, saying, I will be sanctified through those who are nearest to me. Thus I will be honored before the entire people. And Aaron was silent. And we've spent years of our lives learning and discussing this difficult section of the Torah, the death of these two fellows who were not in any way irreverent. They were totally righteous. They were tzaddikim. But they made a move which was not what Hashem wanted. And the rest is a tremendous amount of understanding. What does this mean exactly, that they made this move? And why was Hashem's reaction so severe? And of course, there are only 2 topics in this entire Torah portion which I think is such a powerful idea in itself. The connection between these two subjects, the only two subjects in the entire portion are the death of Nadav and Avihu and the laws of kashrut. Mm-hmm. And we've spoken about that in past years. The fact that, according to one understanding, what they were looking for was some sort of, some sort of way of making this high that they were experiencing, this tremendous elation of being part of Hashem's world and of seeing the Shekhinah descend and of this tremendous revelatory, eye-opening fix on reality. They wanted that to last forever. They never wanted it to change. They always wanted to feel the same way, and that's why they did what they did. But of course, that isn't the Torah's message. The Torah's message is that a person has to live a life according to Hashem's will, and not try to determine things on their own, which, as I've said in past years, I think the laws of kashrut fit in very well with that idea. Hashem is basically saying, this is what you need to do in order to live an exalted life. This is what you need to do in order to be uplifted all the time. You need to follow my word, and you need to elevate yourselves. In any event, I think the proximity of those two things in this week's parsha is very, very amazing. And of course, simultaneously, we have begun the days of the counting of the Omer, and talk about elevation, and talk about an opportunity for spiritual growth, and talk about an opportunity to keep something high. That's what these days of the Omer are really all about. It's about an opportunity for progress and for making sure that the exit that we just took from Egypt is going to last, and is going to take us all the way through to the foot of Mount Sinai in another 7 weeks. And we're going to talk all about that when we come back in a few moments, because I think we're going to be pausing just momentarily. But these days of the Omer are extremely extremely powerful in terms of the potential that they have for bringing us to a place where we really appreciate coming closer to Hashem every day. That's what this count is really all about.
And every day a little bit closer than the day before. And Rabbi, I think we're about to hear the music.
But I don't hear it quite yet. Of course, I do have a hearing issue. Do you hear the music?
Music is playing, Rabbi.
We'll be right back. Stay with us. Be right back on Temple Talk.
Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven, and with me Rabbi Richman here in Jerusalem. We are the Temple Institute, and today is the 22nd day of the month of Nisan. It's the day after the 7th day of Passover / Pesach. It's the day known as Isru Chag, which really, as the Rabbi was explaining before, is a day that has it's festive unto itself. But it's not part of the 7-day Passover holiday. It also is the 7th day of the counting of the Omer. And I'd like to point out that the Rabbi, as he did last year, this year again, is posting each day of the counting of the Omer a very short, up to 1 minute usually, video that he makes with a teaching that's relevant to that particular day and the spiritual aspect of that particular day of the counting of the Omer, the 49-day counting of the Omer, which leads to ultimately the 50th day, which is Shavuot, and which is the day of the receiving of Torah on Mount Sinai.
Can we talk for what we mean by this, the spiritual aspect of that day?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Well, the background, of course, of all of this is from Parshat Emor, which we'll be reading in a couple of weeks, and it's from chapter 23 of the book of Leviticus, when the cycle of the festivals of the year is described there, and we come to the verses about the Omer. Now, the word Omer, of course, is a measurement. It's a dry measure, but the way it's being used here is referring to a particular offering of barley that was actually harvested at the conclusion of the first day of Passover, and it was brought to the Holy Temple. It's basically the beginning of the new harvest, and it was brought as an offering to the Holy Temple, this measure of barley, and it coincides with a commandment in the Torah right here in Emor, in chapter 23 of Vayikra, to count verbally, to actually articulate. You shall count for yourselves, the verse says, from the morrow of the rest day. In Hebrew, mimacharat ha-Shabbat, the day after the Shabbat, which a lot of people misunderstand and think that this is all supposed to be starting on a Sunday because the verse says the day after the Shabbat. But again, another example of the inexorable bond between the written Torah and the oral Torah is that Hashem taught Moses, who subsequently taught his students, that has been transmitted in every generation, that this verse is referring to Passover, that the first day of Passover, for many reasons, it has an aspect of Sabbath-like quality, and it's referred to as the great Shabbat. So the day afterwards is talking about the first day of Passover, and this is the time of the barley harvest. You shall count for yourselves from the morrow of the rest day, from the day when you bring the Omer of the waving, 7 weeks. They shall be complete. Until the morrow of the 7th week you shall count 50 days, and you shall offer a new meal offering for Hashem. And the verses continue to describe these 2 loaves that are actually made of wheat, which are brought in the Holy Temple on Shavuot. So we begin on Passover with an offering of barley in the Holy Temple, and we come to the festival of the giving of the Torah, the festival of weeks, Shavuot, when we bring twin loaves of wheat. And in the meantime, we have this progression of 7 complete weeks, which of course is 49 days. And this is loosely referred to, this whole experience, as the days of the Omer. You have to understand that, even after the temples were destroyed and the Omer offering was not being brought anymore, we still have the commandment of counting the Omer, beginning with the second night of Passover. And that every one of these days, these 49 days, is part of a progression that binds Passover to Shavuot, almost like it's like one long Chol HaMoed. It's like this is like one long period of time. There's an orderly progression, and actually what happens is every evening, the Jewish people, in the evening service, they actually recite a blessing where we bless Hashem that He has sanctified us with His commandments and commanded us to count the Omer, and then we verbalize with our lips. We actually must say out loud, today is the 7th day of the Omer, and in the first 6 days we count the days, and then from the 7th day on we count the days, and the weeks is a special mitzvah. And for example, today we said today is the 7th day, which is 7 days and 1 week of the Omer. And there's a number of aspects here. One aspect is great anticipation that we are expressing, eager anticipation of receiving the Torah at Mount Sinai in 50 days. But there's a special significance to the counting of the 49 days, which relates to the anticipation of and preparation for receiving the Torah. And that has to do with the fact that when the Jewish people were taken out of Egypt, which we observed, which we celebrated, which we marked on the night of the Seder, the first night of Passover, it was with a tremendous compassion that God stretched out His arm, as it were, and took us out of Egypt. And it was like, putting the pedal to the metal and going from 0 to whatever, 180 at once. And He took us out of Egypt. But then the following day, and this is how it's explained on the mystical level, which I think is the best explanation to make it clear. It's like Hashem took us out of Egypt, but we didn't really deserve it because we hadn't done anything to prepare for any great spiritual enlightenment. And the principle in life, the Torah emphasizes, is that in order to really make something lasting, you have to work for it. In order to make an acquisition on a spiritual level, it has to be deserved, it has to be earned. And by the way, that ties in somewhat with this week's epic tragedy of Nadav and Avihu, who basically wanted a high, and they wanted it with all their hearts from a very good place, but that isn't how you do it. It has to be a progression. So what happens is that during these 49 days, we have the opportunity to actually rise each day, level by level. And this corresponds to a mystical idea that there are 49 levels of purity and 49 levels of impurity, and that at the time that the Jewish people were taken out of Egypt, they were on a very low level, the lowest level. And then they had to slowly shed these negative traits in order to become pure and deserving vessels to receive the light of the Torah at Mount Sinai. And so since the very beginning of the time that we are a people, the time that we left Egypt, we have viewed these 49 days as an intense period for character refinement. And of course, that has just as much relevance as it did then, the idea of working on ourselves, as it were, spiritual work to learn how to become masters over ourselves. Because the whole idea about what was going on in Egypt, which of course is called Mitzrayim, which is all about basically constriction, limitations, and boundaries. So we were restrained, and we were inhibited and hampered, and after leaving Egypt, these slaves, who had nothing but a slave mentality, had to spend the next 49 days in the desert preparing themselves spiritually for this monumental experience of receiving the Torah. And the interesting thing about the counting of the Omer is that we are basically dealing with emotion. We were dealing with what's called the 7 emotional attributes. First of all, the word sephira literally means counting. But it has been pointed out by very great men, such as Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, famous Ramak that we have referred to, who died in 1570, the great Moroccan Kabbalist.
Italian.
I'm sorry. No, Spanish. Cordovero is Spanish, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry, Cordovero. I'm very sorry.
I'm sorry.
You're right. You're right.
So am I. We're both sorry. So he writes how the word sephira, which means counting, is related to mispar, which means number, and sipur, which means telling a story, and sefer, which means book, and sapir, which is a sapphire, which is a translucent stone that shines brightly. And all of these are the same 3 letters, which is so beautiful, because what these days really present us with the opportunity to do is to tell the story of our lives as we count up towards the great occasion of receiving the Torah, and we make our souls shine. And the way that we do that basically is when we count the sephira, but it's not magic. This isn't just like, by counting. I say, today is the 7th day, which is 7 days in 1 week. It doesn't work like that. It reminds us of the work that we have to do on these levels, and basically it is dealing with emotional issues, because it's human experience, and human experience is divided into various emotions and quality, and these are actually what the Sephirot are all about. And the interesting thing is that we're talking about basically examining our nature, our characteristics, trying to refine our reactions, and basically like giving ourselves exercises for how we can gain control and mastery over our own emotions. So last week, for example, the first week of the counting of the Omer was the first level, which is the level of chesed, which means love, basically, kindness. This week is the level called gvura, which is tighter. It has to do with justice. It has to do with restraint, with discipline. Following that is Tiferet, which is actually literally means beauty or harmony, but it's actually a mixture of the first two. It's just the right amount of Chesed and Gvura. Then we come to Netzach, which basically means staying power, endurance, and then Hod, which means humility, but it also means splendor. And Yesod, which is foundation, which also alludes to sexual purity, and Malchut is the last level, which means sovereignty, the kingship of Hashem. And there are like these variegated gradations within each day of these admixtures of how these attributes touch each other and how they form a template. They're divine attributes by which Hashem relates to the world. And of course, because we are His creation, they form a template of how we can basically transcend our own pettiness, the things that hold us back, the things that are self-serving, and how we can better connect with each other and better connect with our own humanity and better, most importantly, be a reflection of the divine image in which we were created. In a nutshell, that's what these days of the Counting of the Omer are all about. So what I'm trying to do, and the longest one so far this year has been 1 minute and 7 seconds, Yitzchak. I'm trying to keep them under 1 minute. Some of them are 45 seconds to 49 seconds. I'm trying to take everything that we just described and more, and I'm trying to roll it up into a very, very neat and concise and practical application each day. And I'm taking very rarefied, high concepts that the great sages and mystics talk about what these attributes are all about. And I'm trying to give a practical direction of how we can turn each day's attribute into a working lesson of how we can examine our motivation and how we can try and be a better reflection of the divine image. That's what it's all about. That's what we're doing.
Very beautiful. And as I said, every day on our Facebook page, the Rabbi posts this short video, and we invite you to count along with Rabbi Richman.
And it is a great mitzvah, a great commandment to actually stand each evening after sunset, after twilight, really, and count off the day and the week of the Sephirah. And like, it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for really examining ourselves and also feeling the tremendous yearning and anticipation of coming towards the great festival of weeks. And of course, the deepest thing of all that we have talked about a lot in the past is the fact that we begin the Sephirah count in the Holy Temple, b'motzei Yom Tov Harishon, at the end of the first day of Passover, by bringing this barley to the Holy Temple. And barley is referred to by our sages of blessed memory as animal food. Barley is something that is not fit for human consumption in its raw form. It's served to animals. It's given as animal feed, and that represents the constricted consciousness of the slave mentality, of the embryonic state that we were in when we left Egypt. But then, as we count off these days, and as we begin to reflect on our humanity, as we begin to try to prepare ourselves so that we deserve the light by which Hashem took us out from Egypt. And as we get back to where we once belonged, that we actually had the first night of Passover, that light that Hashem took us out by, but which we didn't do anything to deserve, and now we're trying to slowly make it our own, right? Instead of it being a gift. Then finally on Shavuot, we stand upright as people in the Holy Temple, and we receive the Torah. We actually bring, the only time chametz is ever in the Holy Temple, because there's a prohibition against having leaven all year round in the Holy Temple because of what it represents, which of course is a haughty heart, but that's not a concern when we have the Torah, which is what Shavuot is all about. And therefore the special offering on the festival of Shavuot are 2 loaves of wheat bread, which of course is the symbol of the food of a man. And that shows that we've completed this progression through the days of the Counting of the Omer.
Speaking of progression, Rabbi, it was reported in the various blogs and Facebook pages of temple activists that this year, during the 7 days of Passover, a record number of Jews ascended the Temple Mount, and the number given was 1,373. And then we're talking about actually 5 days that Jews are allowed up on the Mount, and it's usually, I think, 4.5 hours a day. I just read an article in the Jerusalem Post, and they reported that over 1,600 Jews went up. So the number keeps rising. But again, it was, I think, a 35% increase from last year, and I think a 100% increase from 2 years ago in terms of numbers. And over the past couple of years, the numbers just keep growing. And if you look at the faces of people who are going up to the Temple Mount, it's just amazing. Jews of all different
and also,
flavors and stripes are going to the Mount. And here's incremental progress. And I really feel, we didn't do the Korban Pesach, we didn't do the Passover offering, but maybe as consolation, we see that people are awakening, and more people are going to the Temple Mount, placing it, at the top of their hearts, and making a point to put that at the center of their,
to be seen there
of their attention.
And as I mentioned to you the last time that I went up, the experience is definitely becoming much more positive. It's not a cakewalk. It's not what we're praying for, and we're not allowed to pray. But the police are definitely changing their attitude. Is that because of the current minister of internal security? Is it because of political pressure, or is it because of just the public outcry and the public shift in consciousness, and it's becoming so important that they just can't sweep it under the carpet anymore? I don't know why, but the police are definitely changing their attitude, which in itself is a very, very welcome change.
You mentioned earlier, we were talking before, Rabbi, and we mentioned earlier that next Monday is Yom HaShoah. It's Holocaust Remembrance Day, Monday, which is a very, very serious and somber day here in Israel, in which we take stock and remember. And you mentioned that on that same day, there's sort of a new Muslim holiday, which...
Put it this way, I'm not, first of all, I don't want to pass myself off as an Islamic scholar. I'm definitely not, nor do I wish to be. I don't know how often it's been observed in this manner. There is a new phenomena regarding the Muslim holiday, which coincidentally falls out on Holocaust Memorial Day this Monday. And lately, the way it's been observed is it's been by closing the Temple Mount to non-Muslims. So for some couple of years now, coincidentally, this Muslim holiday, which commemorates Muhammad's night flight to heaven, has fallen on Holocaust Memorial Day. Coincidentally, a couple of years ago, there was a story that we reported about, which is that a Jew stopped in his tracks on the Temple Mount on the morning of Holocaust Memorial Day because he heard the siren. There's a siren that goes off all over Israel, and when we hear that siren, no matter where we are, no matter what we're doing, we're in the middle of something, driving down the highway, you stop the car, you get out, and you stand on the side of the car. We stop what we're doing when we hear that siren, and we bow our heads and show our heartfelt sense of loss, and we pray for
unity
and community, and we pray for those that perished in the Holocaust. And he happened to be on the Temple Mount when he heard that, being observed by his Muslim guards, and he stopped, and they were very, very angry. They wanted him to keep on walking, you understand? In the heart of the state of Israel, in the heart of Jews, they wanted him to keep on walking. So the suspicion is that the reason they've become so religious all of a sudden, and that they want to really up the notch of their level of observance of the holiday commemorating Muhammad's night flight, is because they want an excuse to close the Temple Mount on Holocaust Memorial Day and make sure that there aren't any Jews there that might stop in their tracks out of their respect for Holocaust Memorial Day, which, of course, P.S., Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, wrote a doctorate for his PhD in Moscow University in which he denied the Holocaust. So you can connect all these dots if you want.
We'll keep you posted about that. But if those dots connect the way I'm thinking they connect, it's just another instance of that self-destructive desire to catch the Jews at any turn, and to try to destroy Israel, and to come up with any plan no matter how self-destructive.
Yeah, like
it
I
will
said in the
eventually be.
beginning, you know, they just plunged themselves into the sea and not thinking, should we really do this? Maybe we should think this through. No, because at all costs, they have to destroy the Jews.
You know, one thing we haven't talked about, we sort of made a vague reference to maybe, was it's just so beautiful that once Israel crossed the sea and they were free and Egypt was destroyed, the first thing they did was sing. And it was an expression that came from their own hearts. It wasn't a commandment. It wasn't a pre-arranged thing. And as you said earlier in the beginning of Parshat Shmini, as the fire comes down from heaven and the service commences, the people burst out in song. And I just think that is such a beautiful, beautiful expression of complete joy and love and attachment to God, and just coming from the heart, from the soul, and coming as one voice for the entire nation. I just find that to be very, very, very beautiful, and God willing, we will sing again in that one voice in the days to come, soon, speedily. And speaking of music, here it is again. Thank you so much for being with us today. We'll be with you again next week. Temple Talk.